Welcome back to another Explainer, where we take complex financial realities and break them down so you can actually understand what's going on. If you turn on the news right now, you'd think the United States economy is absolutely flawless. The stock market is sitting at an all-time high, the Federal Reserve's inflation strategy seems to be working, unemployment is low, and hey, Arby's just released steak nuggets. It's like, on the surface, life looks incredibly good. But underneath all of those glowing economic headlines, there is some serious trouble brewing. While everyone is busy debating the next interest rate cut, there is a very real, very massive consumer debt crisis quietly bubbling up, one that almost nobody seems to be talking about. So today, we're going to explore the illusion behind this economic prosperity. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. We'll start by comparing the surface versus reality. Then we'll look at the macro debt problem. After that, we're breaking down consumer debt into the good, the bad, and the ugly, before wrapping it all up with the quiet credit crisis. All right, Section 1, the surface versus reality. It is incredibly easy to be lulled into a false sense of security right now. Think of the economy kind of like a massive iceberg. Up top above the water, that's the booming economy. You see the record stock market highs, the low unemployment, everyone is clapping, and the headlines are celebrating. But you have to look at what's lurking beneath the water level. That is the hidden threat. We've got record high household and national debt just bubbling right underneath. So all that so-called growth everyone's bragging about above the surface, it's really just being fueled by this massive consumer debt crisis hiding below. Which brings us to Section 2, the macro debt problem. Listen, before we even look at personal debt, we absolutely have to talk about how the government itself is blowing through cash. It's honestly faster than a bachelor party at 2 a.m. in Miami. The United States right now has more debt than literally any nation in human history. We just crossed an astronomical $38 trillion. That's 38 with a T. It's a number so large it's kind of hard for the human brain to even comprehend. And the thing about borrowing money, as we all know, it is never, ever free. And that brings us to this absolutely staggering figure, $1 trillion. Now, let me be clear, that is not the debt being paid down. No. That is simply the yearly cost just to service the interest on that massive $38 trillion debt. Put simply, the U.S. is shelling out $1 trillion a year just to keep the lights on, and essentially pay to keep the debt collectors off the front lawn. And this comparison brilliantly illustrates just how severe this issue is. Yearly interest now actually outpaces other major federal expenses. We're talking more than national defense, more than income security programs, and more than veterans benefits. Interest has officially become the fastest-growing expense in the entire federal budget, shooting up by over 34% in just the last 2 years alone. Okay, let's pivot to Section 3, the good, housing debt.
So everyday Americans are looking at Uncle Sam's reckless spending and, well, they're following the exact same playbook. According to the New York Fed, total household debt has just exploded. It's up 60% over the last decade, reaching $18.6 trillion. That is the highest level ever recorded. And it's basically split into two main buckets, housing debt and non-housing debt. Debt has effectively become the duct tape holding the entire American economy together. But if we borrow a framework from that classic Clint Eastwood movie, we know not all debt is created equal. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Let's start with the good debt. Mortgage accounts make up the absolute bulk of American household debt. We're looking at a record $13 trillion in closed-end loans. You know how it works. You get a chunk of money up front, you make your monthly payments with interest, and eventually the account closes. Yes, it's a giant, heavy debt you take on for the privilege of owning 4 walls and a roof, but we generally consider it good because it's tied to an appreciating asset. Now, the other part of housing debt is home equity revolving accounts, or HELOCs. This is essentially a credit card for your house. You leverage your home's equity, and people usually justify the spending as an investment back into the property. And sure, these balances have actually jumped 30% since 2021, but sitting at $411 billion total, it remains somewhat modest. It's definitely an eyebrow-raising trend, but it's really not the immediate burning concern, especially compared to what we're going to look at next. Let's move on and see how this builds in Section 4, the bad, student loans. Student loans are basically the problem child of the debt family. Since 1983, college tuition has absolutely skyrocketed. We're talking more than 700%. It has wildly outpaced inflation, housing costs, and especially wages. And why? Well, you've got a system where 18-year-olds can borrow tens of thousands of dollars with literally zero credit history and no collateral. This whole cycle has created a massive $1.7 trillion debt burden. We currently have 44 million borrowers owing an average of $37,000 each.
And honestly, the data here is getting frightening. In just one single year, the serious delinquency rate, meaning payments are 90 days or more late on student debt, rose from under 1% to past 9%. And the kicker? Unlike a car or a house, you can't exactly sell your degree when times get tough to pay off the lender. Plus, these debts almost always survive bankruptcy. They're essentially this financial shadow that you can never, ever outrun.
Which brings us to Section 5, the ugly. Credit cards.
Look, if mortgages are the good and student loans are the bad, credit cards are without a doubt the ugly. And ugly might actually be an understatement. For the first time in recorded history, credit card balances have crossed the $1 trillion mark. Americans have actually piled on more credit card debt in just the last 4 years than they did in the entire decade following the 2008 financial crisis. Think about that. We have over 600 million active accounts right now. Serious delinquencies have climbed past 12%, again, the highest since 2008. And with inflation soaring and wages completely stagnant, the average interest rate on these cards is a crushing 21% plus. People aren't just falling behind, they are drowning in compound interest.
And the financial industry? Well, they've adapted to this drowning consumer through buy now, pay later features. You see these little buttons everywhere online now, right? Pay in 4 installments, Klarna, Affirm. It completely presents itself as this cool financial empowerment. But it's not true financial innovation. It is a marketing makeover. It's credit disguised as convenience, using sleek interfaces and soft-colored slogans to completely normalize debt for a totally new generation of shoppers.
Now, what's really interesting, and honestly pretty bleak, is the reality of this trap. In 2024, 15% of Americans used a buy now, pay later service. But look at the fallout here. 40% of them actually regretted it after realizing the true total costs involved. Even worse, nearly a quarter, 24% of these users have already made a late payment. So the headline celebrates strong consumer spending, but the ugly truth is that people are increasingly having to finance their day-to-day survival, just one small installment plan at a time.
Finally, let's tie this all together in Section 6, the quiet credit crisis.
When you pull back and actually look at the entire American economy from this debt-first perspective, it kind of looks like a giant game of hot potato where everyone is just hoping the music doesn't stop. So the crucial point is captured perfectly right here. America isn't saving for the future, it's financing the present. And this crisis, it's incredibly dangerous exactly because it's not loud, it's not sudden or dramatic, it is quiet, it's gradual, it's happening in plain sight beneath a surface that seems perfectly fine. The stock market is up, sure, but the foundation holding everything up is starting to crack under the weight of trillions in consumer and national debt. Which leaves us with a critical question to ask ourselves as we look at our own lives. Is the foundation of your financial future actually built on true savings and real wealth? Or are you just financing the present on borrowed time? It's a heavy question, for sure, but it's absolutely essential to ask before the music stops. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep looking beneath the surface, and I'll catch you in the next one.